The blazing June sun beat down mercilessly on Rachel Greene's swollen face as she stumbled along the dusty trail, one hand supporting her heavily pregnant belly, the other clutching a small bundle of possessions. Her cracked lips parted with each labored breath, feet blistered and bleeding inside boots not made for the 20 miles she'd already walked. 3 days on the trail from what remained of her homestead, and she knew with the certainty that comes from desperation she wouldn't make it to Tascosa without help. Rachel had fled when she had to, not when it was wise. 8 months pregnant, alone since her husband Daniels' passing 2 months prior, she'd awakened to smoke and angry voices. The drought of 1876 had turned the Texas panhandle into a tinderbox of desperation, where cattle barons warred with homesteaders over every precious acre and water source. She'd grabbed what she could carry and slipped out the back while men argued over her land at the front door. Now, as the merciless afternoon heat shimmered across the plains, Rachel's vision blurred. The distant silhouette approaching on horseback wavered like a mirage. Friend or foe, it hardly mattered anymore. She couldn't run if she tried. "Madam," the man's voice reached her before she could make out his features. "Madam, you all right there?" Rachel's knees buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Through half-closed eyes, she saw a sun-weathered face framed by sandy brown hair, concern etched in eyes the color of a summer sky. "Water," she managed to croak. The stranger lowered her gently to sit in the sparse shade of a scrub oak and pressed a canteen to her lips. "Small sips now," he cautioned, his voice low and steady. "Too much at once will make you sick." Rachel obeyed, the lukewarm water feeling like heaven against her parched throat. As her vision cleared, she studied the man crouched beside her, trail worn but clean, a star-shaped badge pinned to his vest. "I'm Ranger Beau Daniels," he said, tipping his hat. "And you look like you've been walking a mighty long way, madam." "Rachel Greene," she replied, her voice finding strength. "I'm trying to reach Tascosa, my homestead." She swallowed hard. "There's nothing left for me there now." Beau's eyes drifted to her swollen belly, then back to her face. "And the baby's father, buried on our land 2 months past. Fever took him." Rachel straightened her spine with the last of her dignity. "I need to reach town before." She placed a protective hand on her stomach. The ranger nodded, understanding without words. "How far have you come?" "3 days walking, from Sweetwater Creek." Beau's eyebrows shot up. "That's near 25 miles in this heat. It's a wonder you're still—" He stopped himself, reconsidering his words. "You're one tough woman, Mrs. Greene." "Rachel," she corrected, too exhausted for formalities. Beau stood, surveying the harsh landscape around them. Tascosa was still a good 15 miles north, and the woman before him wouldn't make it another 5 on foot. "We'll find aid together," he said, decision made. "My horse can carry us both to the next homestead, then we'll figure our way to town." Rachel looked up, her green eyes filled with equal parts hope and wariness. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Beau crouched again, meeting her gaze squarely. "Madam Rachel, I've ridden with the Rangers for 6 years, seen good folks and bad and plenty in between. But I've never left someone who needed help out in this wilderness, especially not." His eyes flickered to her belly again. Rachel nodded, too practical to reject salvation when it appeared, even if it wore a dusty Stetson and carried a Colt .45 on its hip. "I accept your help, Ranger Daniels. And I'll repay it someday, I swear it." "Beau," he replied with the hint of a smile, "just Beau will do fine." He helped her stand, steadying her when she swayed. With gentle efficiency, he guided her to his chestnut gelding, explaining how he'd seat her sideways across the saddle while he walked alongside. "I can walk a while longer," Rachel protested, though they both knew it was pride talking. "No, madam," Beau said firmly. That baby needs you strong, and you've done enough walking for both of you. Something about the quiet authority in his voice silenced her objections. As Beau helped her mount, Rachel noticed the careful placement of his hands, the respectful distance he maintained despite their intimate circumstances. In a land where dangerous men outnumbered safe ones, such consideration was as precious as water. There's a homestead about 3 miles north, Beau explained, leading the horse at a gentle pace. Family name of Wilson. Good people. They'll help us get you to town proper. Rachel nodded, the rhythm of the horse's movement lulling her into a daze. She fought to stay alert, one hand gripping the saddle horn, the other cradling her belly. The baby kicked vigorously, as if sensing their change in fortune. Your little one's active, Beau observed, noticing her movement. Always has been, Rachel replied, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Daniel used to say we had a future cattle driver in there, the way this child kicks. Daniel was your husband, Rachel nodded, throat tightening. We came west 3 years ago, had the homestead almost paid for. The memory of flames consuming their cabin flashed behind her eyes. Now it's all gone. Beau's jaw tightened. Was it Harlan Reynolds' men? Rachel's head jerked up in surprise. How did you? I've been tracking a pattern of homesteader harassment across 3 counties. Reynolds wants to expand his grazing territory now that the drought's forcing everyone to spread out. Beau's voice was matter of fact, but Rachel sensed the controlled anger beneath his words. They didn't see me leave, Rachel said. I heard them arguing about water rights to our creek. Then I smelled smoke. She closed her eyes briefly. Daniel's grave is there. I couldn't even say goodbye properly. Beau remained silent for a moment. I'm sorry, Rachel. That's not right what happened to you, not right at all. They continued in silence, the vastness of the plains stretching around them. Occasionally, Beau would point out landmarks or offer her more water. Rachel studied him as they traveled the way he scanned the horizon constantly. How he adjusted his pace to keep the horse's gait smooth for her comfort, the gentle firmness with which he handled his weapon when a suspicious movement caught his eye. You said you've been a ranger 6 years. Rachel asked eventually, needing conversation to stay alert. Yes, madam. Joined up after the war. Seemed the right thing to do. You fought for the South. A shadow crossed Beau's face. I did. Not proud of everything from those days, but I was young and believed what I was told. He glanced up at her. War has a way of teaching hard lessons about what matters and what don't. Rachel nodded. Daniel was a Union man. We had our disagreements about it, but in the end, we both wanted the same thing, a place of our own, land to work, children to raise. That's all most folks want, Beau agreed. Problem is, men like Reynolds think their wants matter more than other people's needs. The sun was beginning its westward descent when they reached a rise in the land. Below them lay a modest homestead, a sturdy cabin with smoke rising from the chimney, a small barn and fields where corn stood in neat rows despite the drought. The Wilsons, Beau explained. Thomas served with me briefly. His wife Martha is handy with medicines. As they approached the homestead, a man emerged from the barn, rifle raised cautiously until he recognized Beau. He lowered his weapon and called toward the house. Martha, come out here. Beau Daniels has brought company. The reunion between Beau and Thomas was warm but brief, the urgency of Rachel's situation taking precedence. Martha Wilson, a robust woman with kind eyes and capable hands, took one look at Rachel and immediately took charge. Thomas, heat water. Beau, help Mrs. Greene inside. I'll need my medicines. She turned to Rachel with a gentle smile. Don't you worry, dear. We'll have you comfortable in no time. Inside the cabin, Martha examined Rachel thoroughly, her experienced fingers probing with care. "Baby's positioned well, thank the Lord. But you're exhausted and showing signs of heat sickness." She looked at Rachel sternly. "How far along are you?" "8 months, I reckon. Maybe a bit more." Martha nodded. "Well, I don't think the little one's coming today, but you'll not be traveling to Tascosa anytime soon. You'll stay with us until you've recovered your strength." Rachel started to protest, but Martha silenced her with a look that brooked no argument. "This isn't charity, Mrs. Greene. It's what neighbors do." Outside, Beau and Thomas spoke in low voices. Rachel could see them through the window, Beau's tall frame tense as he described what had happened at her homestead, Thomas's shoulders slumping at the news. "Reynolds has been pushing hard since spring," Thomas said loud enough for Rachel to hear. "3 families west of here abandoned their claims last month. The law's on their side," Beau replied. "But the law doesn't help much when you're outnumbered 10-1. Martha snorted as she prepared a tea of herbs for Rachel. "Law's fine if you can enforce it. Out here, we're too scattered." Rachel sipped the bitter tea, grateful for its soothing effect. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door." "Trouble finds its own way," Thomas said, coming inside. "You just focus on that baby and getting your strength back." Beau remained in the doorway, hat in hand. "I should head into Tascosa tonight. Report what's happened, see if I can round up some support." Rachel felt a sharp pang of disappointment at his imminent departure. "Foolish," she told herself. "He's done his duty by you," but she couldn't deny the sense of safety his presence provided. Martha, observant as ever, intervened. "Nonsense, Beau Daniels. It's nearly sundown and you've been on the trail for days yourself. You'll stay the night and leave at first light." Beau hesitated, then nodded. "Obliged, Martha." Dinner that evening was simple but plentiful: corn bread, beans, and salted pork with precious coffee afterward. Rachel ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware of Beau's occasional glance in her direction. As night fell, Martha prepared a pallet for Beau near the fireplace while Rachel took their small guest room. Thomas checked the perimeter one last time before locking up, a routine precaution in a land where danger could arrive unannounced. In the quiet darkness of the borrowed room, Rachel lay awake, one hand resting on her belly, the other clutching Daniel's worn pocket watch, the only keepsake she'd managed to save. Through the thin wall, she could hear the low murmur of voices as Beau spoke with the Wilsons. "Can't just let Reynolds get away with it," Thomas was saying. "I don't intend to," Beau replied, his voice carrying a steel edge Rachel hadn't heard before. "But I need to do this proper through the courts if possible." "And if not?" Martha asked. A long silence followed. "Then I'll handle it another way." Rachel closed her eyes, trying not to think about what another way might entail. For now she was safe, her baby was safe, and tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Sleep claimed her at last, dreamless and deep. Dawn arrived with the smell of coffee and bacon. Rachel awoke feeling better than she had in days. Martha helped her wash and dress, then insisted she eat a substantial breakfast. "You're eating for 2, she reminded Rachel. "And you've miles to make up." At the table, Beau was already dressed for travel, his hat beside him as he discussed routes with Thomas. He stood when Rachel entered, a gesture of respect that touched her. "Morning, Mrs. Greene. You're looking stronger today." "Thanks to your kindness," she replied, including Martha and Thomas in her grateful glance. "All of you." As they ate, plans were discussed. Beau would ride to Tascosa, report the burning of Rachel's homestead, and seek legal recourse against Reynolds. He'd also arrange for Rachel to have a place to stay in town when she was strong enough to travel. "The midwife there, Mrs. Callahan, might take you in," Martha suggested. "She's always looking for an extra pair of hands, and with your condition, you'd be perfect." Rachel nodded, though the thought of charity still stung her pride. I'm handy with sewing too, and cooking when I have supplies. Tascosa's growing, Thomas added. Folks there need all sorts of services. Beau finished his coffee and stood. I should get moving. I'll be back in 3 days, 4 at most. Thomas, you keep your rifle loaded just in case. Thomas nodded solemnly. Always do. Martha packed provisions for Beau's journey while Rachel watched, wishing she had something to offer him in return for his help. As he prepared to leave, she followed him outside to the hitching post. Ranger Daniels Beau, she began, unsure how to express her gratitude. He turned, the morning sun casting his face in golden light. You don't owe me any thanks, Rachel, just doing what's right. Nevertheless, you saved our lives, she said, one hand on her belly. I won't forget that. Beau's expression softened. You take care of yourself and that little one, I'll be back before you know it. As he mounted his horse, Rachel suddenly reached out, touching his boot. Be careful. Reynolds has many men. Beau looked down at her, something unreadable flashing in his eyes. I've faced worse odds, he said with a slight smile. And I've got something to come back for now. The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Then he tipped his hat, clicked to his horse and rode away toward Tascosa. Rachel watched until he disappeared over the horizon, one hand shading her eyes, the other supporting her belly where the baby kicked enthusiastically. He'll be back, Martha said, coming to stand beside her. Beau Daniels is a man of his word. I know, Rachel replied softly, though she wondered how she could be so certain about a man she'd known less than a day. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm of rest and gentle work. Martha insisted Rachel regain her strength gradually, allowing her to help with simple tasks, shelling peas, folding laundry, mixing bread dough. In the evenings, they sat on the porch while Thomas played harmonica, the melancholy tunes floating across the darkening plains. Rachel learned more about her hosts, how Thomas and Martha had come from Tennessee 8 years earlier, how they'd lost 2 children to diphtheria before finally having success with their small farm. They spoke of their struggles with drought and isolation, but never with bitterness or regret. Land's hard but fair, Thomas often said. It gives back what you put in eventually. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as Rachel helped Martha hang laundry, the baby shifted suddenly, causing her to gasp and clutch her side. Martha was at her side instantly. What is it? Pain. Rachel shook her head. Just moved different than usual, felt strange. Martha's experienced hands probed gently. Baby's dropping a bit. Getting ready, though I think you've still got weeks to go. She led Rachel to a chair in the shade. Still, best to take it easy. As dusk approached with no sign of Beau, Rachel tried to hide her disappointment. He said 3 or 4 days, she reminded herself aloud. Men's timing is never exact, Martha replied with a knowing smile. Especially when they've got official business. That night, Rachel dreamed of fire, her cabin engulfed in flames. Daniel's grave marker blackened with soot, men's laughter echoing in the distance. She woke with a start, her nightdress soaked with sweat, heart pounding. Unable to return to sleep, she rose carefully and made her way to the cabin's front window. The plains stretched silver under moonlight, vast and empty. Somewhere out there, Beau was making his way back, or so she hoped. The realization of how quickly she'd come to depend on the thought of his return disturbed her. Daniel had been gone barely 2 months. Her grief was still fresh, her marriage bed barely cold. What kind of woman developed feelings for another man so quickly? Yet as she pressed her forehead against the cool glass, Rachel admitted to herself that it wasn't just gratitude she felt for the Ranger. A movement on the horizon caught her attention. At first she thought it was her imagination, but then she saw it clearly, a rider approaching, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Rachel's heart leaped. Beau had returned. She started to call for Thomas but hesitated, watching the approaching figure more carefully. Something wasn't right. The rider moved too low in the saddle, swaying as if injured or drunk. She roused Thomas quietly, pointing out the window. He squinted into the darkness, then reached for his rifle. "Wake Martha," he instructed in a whisper. "Stay inside, away from windows." Rachel obeyed, her earlier joy turning to dread. Martha joined Thomas at the door, a shotgun in her capable hands. They waited in tense silence as the rider drew nearer. "It's Beau," Thomas suddenly said, lowering his rifle. "And he's hurt." They rushed outside as Beau's horse stumbled to a halt in the yard. Beau slumped forward, one hand pressed to his side where his shirt was dark with blood. "Ambushed," he managed as Thomas helped him down. "Reynolds' men. They knew I was coming." Martha took charge immediately, directing Thomas to carry Beau inside while she gathered her medical supplies. Rachel cleared the table, helping them lay Beau across it. "Bullets still in there," Martha announced after cutting away Beau's shirt to reveal an angry wound in his left side. "Needs to come out." "Do it," Beau said through gritted teeth, his eyes finding Rachel's. "Sorry for the trouble, Mrs. Greene." Rachel moved to his side, taking his hand. "No trouble, Ranger. We're finding aid together, remember." A ghost of a smile touched his pale lips before Martha pressed a whiskey-soaked cloth to his face. "Breathe deep," she instructed. "This won't be pleasant." Rachel stayed at Beau's side throughout the gruesome procedure, holding his shoulders when he bucked against the pain, wiping his brow as fever set in. Martha worked with silent efficiency, extracting the bullet, cleaning the wound, applying poultices of herbs and honey. "He's strong," Martha said when they finally moved Beau to Thomas's cot near the fireplace. "But he's lost a lot of blood. Next day or two will tell." Rachel nodded, settling herself on a chair beside the cot. "I'll watch him." Martha started to protest, then reconsidered. "Call me if his fever rises or the wound starts seeping." She patted Rachel's shoulder. "You care for him, don't you?" Rachel stared at Beau's unconscious form. "He risked everything for a woman he'd never met. How could I not?" Through the long night, Rachel kept her vigil. She bathed Beau's face with cool water when fever made him restless, spoke softly to him when he called out names she didn't recognize, held his hand when he seemed most lost in delirium. Near dawn, his fever broke. His eyes opened, clear and aware, finding her immediately. "You're still here," he whispered. Rachel squeezed his hand. "Where else would I be?" He tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. Rachel gently pushed him back down. "Don't undo Martha's good work. You need to rest." Beau relaxed against the pillow but kept his eyes on her. "They were waiting for me on the trail back from Tascosa, 3 of Reynolds' men." "What happened in town?" Rachel asked, offering him water he drank carefully before answering. "Filed the report. Marshal promised to investigate, but—" He shook his head slightly. "Reynolds has friends in high places. Marshal suggested it might have been accidental, a wildfire from your cooking stove." Rachel's jaw tightened. "There were men there. I heard them." "I believe you," Beau assured her, "but we need proof to make charges stick." He took a deep breath, wincing again. "I did find Mrs. Callahan. She's willing to take you in, help with the birth when it comes." Rachel nodded, though the thought of Tascosa now filled her with unease. "And Reynolds' men. They'll try again, won't they?" Beau's expression hardened. "Probably. They didn't expect me to survive the ambush." A grim smile touched his lips. "Fact that I'm still breathing will complicate their plans." "You killed them?" Rachel asked quietly. "2 of them," Beau admitted without pride or regret. "Third one ran. He'll report back to Reynolds." Rachel absorbed this information, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly. The baby kicked as if reminding her of the stakes. "What happens now?" she asked. Beau looked toward the window where dawn was breaking. "Now we wait, I heal. You gather your strength. When we're both ready, we make for Tascosa together." And then, his eyes returned to hers, steady and determined. "Then we fight for your land, Rachel. Legal if we can, other ways if we must." Over the next week, both Beau and Rachel regained their strength. Rachel helped Martha with household tasks, insisting on contributing to the family that had taken them in. Beau, stubborn in his recovery, was soon moving around despite Martha's protests. Thomas kept watch over the homestead, wary of Reynolds' retribution, but no riders appeared on the horizon. The temporary peace allowed Beau and Rachel time to know each other better. They talked in the evenings on the porch, Beau describing his childhood in East Texas, Rachel sharing stories of her life before the war in Missouri. They discovered shared values, a belief in hard work, a love of open skies, a deep sense of justice. "Daniel and I wanted a dozen children," Rachel confessed one evening as they watched the sunset paint the plains in gold and crimson. "Seems foolish now, not foolish," Beau replied softly. "Hopeful. Hope's never foolish, even when it doesn't work out the way we planned." Rachel studied his profile, strong and steady in the fading light. "Do you have family somewhere, Beau?" He shook his head. "Parents died in '63 during the war. No brothers or sisters." He glanced at her. "Rangers became my family, I suppose." "That's a lonely kind of family," Rachel observed. Beau's smile held a touch of sadness. "It is that, but it's given me purpose." And after, when the frontier's tamed and rangers aren't needed, he considered this, looking out across the vast landscape. "Never really thought that far ahead. Land, maybe. A place of my own." His voice softened. "Someone to share it with." The words hung between them, full of possibility. Rachel felt the baby move, a gentle reminder of her complicated situation. She was a widow, soon to be a mother, homeless but for charity, with a man who'd claimed her heart faster than reason allowed. "Penny for your thoughts," Beau said, breaking the silence. Rachel smiled. "Not worth that much." "I disagree." His hand found hers on the porch railing, warm and calloused. "Everything about you is valuable, Rachel Greene." Before she could respond, Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Rider coming. Single, moving slow." Beau was on his feet instantly, hand going to his gun despite his healing wound. "Get inside, Rachel." She hesitated. "Beau, please," he said, his eyes intense. "I can't protect you and worry about you at the same time." Reluctantly, Rachel went inside, watching through the window as Beau and Thomas positioned themselves strategically. Thomas on the porch, rifle ready. Beau concealed by the corner of the barn. The rider approached at a deliberate pace, hands clearly visible on the reins. As he drew closer, Rachel could see it was an older man, gray-bearded and weathered, wearing the dust of long travel. "That's Judge Isaac Parker," Martha whispered beside her. "Circuit judge from Fort Smith. They call him the hanging judge." "What's he doing here?" Rachel wondered aloud. Martha shook her head. "No good news ever comes with a judge, that's certain." Outside, Thomas had recognized the judge as well. He lowered his rifle and called to Beau, who emerged cautiously from his position. Judge Parker dismounted stiffly, shaking hands with both men before they escorted him into the cabin. He removed his hat upon seeing the women, revealing a shock of white hair above piercing blue eyes. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted Martha. Then his gaze turned to Rachel. "And you must be Mrs. Greene." "I've come a considerable distance to speak with you and Ranger Daniels." Martha brought coffee while they all settled around the table. The judge accepted the cup gratefully, taking a long sip before addressing them. "I received a most disturbing report from Marshal Collins in Tascosa," he began, his voice deep and resonant with authority. Claims of homesteader harassment, arson, and attempted murder of a Texas Ranger. Beau leaned forward. All true, Your Honor. I filed the report myself before Reynolds' men tried to kill me on the trail. Judge Parker nodded solemnly. So I gathered. Marshal Collins seemed inclined to dismiss these charges. Fortunately, I've known Collins long enough to recognize when he's been influenced by outside interests. Hope stirred in Rachel's heart. You believe us? The judge's keen eyes assessed her. Mrs. Greene, I've spent 30 years separating truth from lies in courtrooms. Ranger Daniels has an impeccable record, and the pattern of incidents against homesteaders in this region has not escaped my notice. He took another sip of coffee. What I believe, however, matters less than what can be proven in court. Mr. Reynolds is a powerful man with powerful friends. So he gets away with it, Thomas said bitterly. Just like always, not necessarily. Judge Parker placed his cup down deliberately. I've issued warrants for the arrest of Harlan Reynolds and his foreman, Samuel Tucker, on suspicion of multiple crimes. I've also brought federal marshals who are currently in Tascosa, awaiting my return. Beau straightened, wincing slightly at the pull on his wound. You're going after Reynolds directly. Justice must be blind, Ranger Daniels. A man's wealth and connections cannot place him above the law. The judge's expression hardened. However, I need witnesses willing to testify, starting with Mrs. Greene. All eyes turned to Rachel. She placed both hands protectively over her belly, the magnitude of what the judge was asking clear to everyone. You want me to publicly accuse Harlan Reynolds, she said slowly. A man who's already tried to kill Ranger Daniels and burn me out of my home. Judge Parker didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, madam, I do. It would be dangerous, I won't pretend otherwise, but without testimony from those directly affected, the case weakens considerably. Beau's jaw tightened. She's 8 months pregnant, Judge. Asking her to put herself in Reynolds' sights, I'll do it, Rachel interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. If it means justice for Daniel and our land, I'll testify. Rachel, no, Beau protested. We'll find another way. She met his concerned gaze firmly. What other way, Beau? You said yourself, Reynolds has friends in high places. If Judge Parker is willing to hear us, this might be our only chance. The judge watched their exchange with interest. Your concern for Mrs. Greene is commendable, Ranger. But she appears quite capable of making her own decisions. It's not just her decision, Beau argued, gesturing toward Rachel's belly. That baby deserves consideration too. And what future does this child have? Rachel countered, if men like Reynolds can steal and burn with impunity. What kind of world am I bringing this baby into if I'm not willing to stand for what's right? Silence fell across the table. Martha reached over to squeeze Rachel's hand in silent support. Thomas nodded his approval. Judge Parker regarded her with new respect. You're a woman of remarkable courage, Mrs. Greene, the judge said finally. We'll provide protection, of course. My marshals are quite competent. Beau still looked unhappy, but he didn't argue further. When do you want us in Tascosa, Judge? 3 days' time. The hearing will be held at the courthouse. Reynolds and Tucker will be brought in tomorrow. The judge finished his coffee. I should return to town. The marshals will be expecting me. As they walked the judge to his horse, Beau pulled him aside for a private word. Rachel couldn't hear what was said, but the judge's expression turned grave as he nodded in response to whatever Beau had told him. After the judge departed, Beau returned to Rachel's side, his face troubled. I don't like this, he said without preamble. Reynolds won't take this lying down, judge or no judge. I know, Rachel replied. But it feels right, Beau. For the first time since Daniel died, I feel like I'm doing something that matters, not just surviving. Beau's expression softened as he regarded her. "You're something special, Rachel Greene." Daniel was a fortunate man. The warmth in his voice made her cheeks flush. "We should prepare for the journey to Tascosa," she said, deflecting the moment of intimacy. Beau nodded, though his eyes remained on her face a moment longer. 3 days. "I'll be ready." The preparations for their journey occupied the next 2 days. Martha insisted on packing ample provisions for Rachel's health and comfort. Thomas offered his wagon for the trip, refusing Beau's attempts to decline. "You can't put a woman in her condition on horseback," Thomas insisted. "And you're still healing yourself, Ranger. Don't be stubborn about it." The night before their departure, Rachel found sleep elusive. She sat in the rocking chair by the hearth, staring into the dying embers, lost in thought until Beau's quiet footsteps approached. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, settling on the bench across from her. Rachel shook her head. "Too much on my mind." "Second thoughts about testifying?" "No." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm committed to seeing this through, but I am worried about what comes after, where I'll go, how I'll manage with the baby." Beau was quiet for a long moment, the firelight casting shadows across his features. "I've been thinking about that too," he finally said. And he leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I've got savings, not a fortune, but enough. I was thinking about buying land, maybe near your homestead if we can reclaim it." Rachel's heart quickened. "Your own place?" Beau nodded. "Ranger work is getting scarcer as things settle down." "Time I put down roots." His eyes held hers. "I thought maybe we could help each other. You know the land, how to work it. I can provide protection, build what needs building." "As neighbors?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Beau's gaze didn't waver. "At first, maybe. But Rachel, I think you know I'm hoping for more than that, given time." The directness of his words both startled and touched her. "Beau, I'm carrying another man's child. I'm still grieving him." "I know that," he said gently. "And I respected Daniel without ever meeting him, for helping make you who you are. I'm not asking for promises tonight, just possibility." Rachel considered his words, her hands resting on her belly where the baby slept. The future Beau suggested wasn't one she'd imagined, but sitting across from him in the firelight, she could see it clearly: a home rebuilt, land working again, children playing in the yard. Not replacing what she'd lost with Daniel, but building something new, equally valuable. "Possibility," she repeated softly. "I can offer that." Beau's smile reached his eyes, warming them. "That's more than enough for now." They departed for Tascosa at dawn, the wagon loaded with supplies and Martha's home remedies, just in case. Thomas drove the team with Beau riding alongside, rifle across his saddle. Rachel sat on the wagon bench, cushioned by quilts Martha had insisted she take. The journey would take most of the day. They traveled in companionable silence for the first few hours, each lost in thoughts of the confrontation to come. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat the lunch Martha had packed. As they prepared to continue their journey, a dust cloud on the horizon caught Beau's attention. He grabbed his spyglass, focusing intently. "Riders," he announced grimly. "4 of them coming fast." Thomas reached for his rifle. "Reynolds' men, can't tell yet, but we're not taking chances." Beau turned to Rachel. "Get in the back of the wagon, stay low." She obeyed without question, nestling among the supplies as Thomas and Beau prepared for possible confrontation. The baby kicked anxiously, sensing her tension. "Easy, little one," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "Your mama's scared too, but we've got good men protecting us." The riders drew closer. Through a gap in the wagon canvas, Rachel could see Beau position himself strategically, his wounded side protected by the wagon's bulk. Thomas stood by the horses, rifle ready but not yet raised. Texas Rangers. one of the approaching men called when they were within earshot. "Don't shoot." Rachel felt a surge of relief as Beau lowered his weapon slightly. "Identify yourselves," he called back. "Ranger Captain Jim Wallace and deputies, sent by Judge Parker to escort you to Tascosa." The riders approached at a more measured pace, hands visible. Rachel recognized the lead rider's uniform as similar to Beau's. The captain dismounted, approaching with cautious respect. "Ranger Daniels," he greeted. "Judge Parker was concerned when you didn't arrive by noon. Sent us to ensure your safe passage." Beau holstered his weapon. "Appreciate the thought, Captain. We got a late start." Captain Wallace's eyes flickered to the wagon. "Mrs. Greene with you, I'm here," Rachel called, emerging carefully from her hiding place. The captain tipped his hat respectfully. "Madam, Judge Parker has arranged secure accommodations for you in town. Reynolds' men have been making threats since their boss was brought in yesterday." Thomas looked alarmed. "They know about the hearing." "Hard to keep secrets in a town like Tascosa," Wallace replied. "But we've got the courthouse secured and extra men patrolling." They resumed their journey with the Rangers riding escort, 2 in front, 2 behind. The added protection should have been reassuring, but Rachel noticed Beau growing increasingly vigilant as they approached Tascosa, his eyes constantly scanning the landscape. "You're expecting trouble," she observed quietly. Beau's expression remained grim. "Reynolds has money and connections. Money buys loyalty from certain kinds of men. The kind who'd ambush a ranger on the trail," she suggested. His eyes met hers briefly. "Exactly those kind." Tascosa appeared on the horizon by mid-afternoon, a growing settlement straddling the Canadian River, with more permanent structures than Rachel had expected. The courthouse stood prominently near the center of town, a 2-story building with a small bell tower. Captain Wallace led them directly to a sturdy house near the church. "Mrs. Callahan's place," he explained. "She's expecting you, Mrs. Greene. Ranger Daniels, you'll be staying at the ranger station across town." Rachel felt a stab of anxiety at the thought of separation. Beau must have sensed it because he immediately objected. "With respect, Captain, I'd prefer to stay closer." "Perhaps the hotel next door," Wallace hesitated. Judge's orders were specific about keeping witnesses separate for their protection. "I'm not just a witness," Beau countered. "I'm Mrs. Greene's official escort. My duty isn't complete until she's safely through tomorrow's hearing." The captain relented. "Hotel it is, then, but I'm posting a man outside Mrs. Callahan's place regardless." Rachel was introduced to Mrs. Callahan, a no-nonsense widow in her 50s who sized Rachel up with experienced eyes. 8 months if I'm any judge," she declared. "First baby," Rachel nodded. "Well, you look healthy enough despite your troubles. Come in, I've prepared a room." She nodded curtly to Beau. "Ranger, I run a respectable house. You can call on Mrs. Greene at proper hours." Beau tipped his hat, a hint of amusement touching his eyes. "Yes, madam. I'll return in the morning to escort Mrs. Greene to the courthouse." As Rachel settled into Mrs. Callahan's spare room, the reality of the next day's confrontation began to weigh heavily. She would face the man responsible for destroying her home, possibly for Daniel's death if the fever had come from contaminated water, as she suspected. She would do so while carrying a child, vulnerable and alone but for Beau's steadfast presence. Mrs. Callahan brought a tray with soup and fresh bread. "Eat," she instructed. "Then rest. Tomorrow will be trying enough without adding exhaustion." "Have you seen him?" Rachel asked. "Reynolds?" The midwife's expression hardened. "I've had the misfortune. Strutting around town like he owns it, which he nearly does, between his cattle interests and the businesses he controls. Judge Parker believes we can bring him to justice." Mrs. Callahan's laugh held little humor. The judge is a good man with a strong sense of right, but men like Reynolds rarely face consequences for their actions. Then why help me? Rachel asked. The older woman's face softened slightly. Because trying and failing is better than not trying at all. And because that baby deserves a mother who stood up for what's right. Rachel slept fitfully, dreaming of courtrooms where Daniel sat in judgment, of fires that couldn't be extinguished, of a baby crying whom she couldn't reach. She woke before dawn, her back aching, the baby restless within her. She dressed carefully in the clean clothes. Martha had provided a simple dark blue dress that accommodated her condition while still appearing respectable. Mrs. Callahan helped her arrange her hair, twisting it into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. "You look proper," the midwife approved. "Jury needs to see you as a respectable widow, not a charity case." Beau arrived promptly at 8, dressed in his Ranger uniform, freshly shaved and somber. He assessed Rachel with concern. "You didn't sleep well," he observed immediately. She attempted a smile. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's watching closely." He offered his arm. "Ready." The courthouse was already crowded when they arrived. Judge Parker had arranged for Rachel to wait in a small anteroom until called to testify. Through the door, she could hear the murmur of voices as the proceedings began. Beau remained at her side, his presence a comfort in the strained atmosphere. "Remember," he said quietly, "just tell the truth as you experienced it. Nothing more, nothing less." Rachel nodded, her throat tight with anxiety. "What if it's not enough? What if they don't believe me?" "Then we've still done what's right," Beau replied, his eyes intent on hers. "And we'll find another way forward." A court official appeared at the door. "Mrs. Greene, Judge Parker is ready for you now." Rachel rose, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. Beau caught them in his, stilling their movement. "I'll be right there," he promised. "Just look at me if you feel afraid." The courtroom fell silent as Rachel entered, all eyes turning to assess the pregnant widow. She kept her gaze forward, focusing on Judge Parker's steady presence at the bench. Only when she was seated in the witness chair did she allow herself to look at the defense table. Harlan Reynolds was not what she had expected. Rather than the monstrous figure of her imagination, he was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, silver-haired and expensively dressed. He regarded her with cold calculation, no trace of guilt or compassion in his steel-gray eyes. Judge Parker's voice drew her attention. "State your name for the record, please." "Rachel Elizabeth Greene." "Mrs. Greene, you understand you're under oath to tell the truth?" "I do, Your Honor." "Please tell the court about the events of June 15th of this year, regarding your homestead near Sweetwater Creek." Rachel took a deep breath, finding Beau's supportive gaze in the crowd before beginning her testimony. She described waking to voices, recognizing them as Reynolds' men whom she'd seen before at the general store. She recounted hiding as they argued over water rights to the creek that ran through her property, then smelling smoke as they departed. "I grabbed what I could carry and fled," she concluded, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "My husband's grave was there, all our work for 3 years. Everything gone." Reynolds' lawyer, a slick-looking man from Amarillo, rose for cross-examination. His questions were designed to undermine her credibility, suggesting she couldn't positively identify the men, implying the fire might have been an accident of her own making, insinuating she was seeking compensation through false accusations. Through it all, Rachel maintained her composure, answering truthfully even when the questions became personal and intrusive. "And isn't it true, Mrs. Greene," the lawyer finally asked, "that your homestead was failing even before the fire? That without your husband you couldn't manage the land properly?" Anger flashed through Rachel, burning away her nervousness. My husband taught me everything about running our place. We were doing fine, even with the drought. The creek on our property was why Mr. Reynolds wanted our land. It was one of the few water sources that hadn't dried up. The lawyer smiled condescendingly. Yet you have no proof that Mr. Reynolds or his men set the fire, do you? Rachel met his gaze squarely. I know what I heard and saw, sir. I know they came to our land uninvited, argued about taking our water rights, and then our cabin burned. Perhaps in your world such coincidences happen regularly. In mine, they do not. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Parker suppressed a smile as he called for order. Rachel was dismissed from the stand, legs shaky as she returned to her seat beside Beau. You did well, he whispered. Really well. Beau was called next, his testimony supporting Rachel's while adding the ambush he'd suffered on the trail. Reynolds watched him with undisguised hatred, whispering frequently to his lawyer during Beau's account. The proceedings continued through the afternoon. 3 other homesteaders testified to similar intimidation by Reynolds' men. A stable boy from Tascosa described overhearing Reynolds order his foreman to deal with that ranger permanent-like. The foreman, Samuel Tucker, refused to testify, invoking his right against self-incrimination. As the day wore on, Rachel grew increasingly uncomfortable. Her back ached fiercely, and occasional sharp pains radiated across her abdomen. She shifted in her seat, trying to find relief without drawing attention. Beau noticed immediately upon returning to her side after his testimony. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "Just tired," she assured him, though another pain chose that moment to grip her, making her wince. His eyes narrowed in concern. "That's not fatigue, Rachel. How long have you been having pains?" "They're not regular," she insisted. "The baby's not due for weeks yet." Before Beau could respond, Judge Parker called for closing arguments. The prosecutor passionately summarized the evidence against Reynolds, while the defense lawyer dismissed the testimonies as circumstantial and motivated by envy of Reynolds' success. Finally, Judge Parker addressed the courtroom. "Having heard the evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to bind Harlan Reynolds over for trial on charges of arson, intimidation, and conspiracy to commit murder. Bail is denied, given the serious nature of these charges and evidence of witness tampering." Reynolds surged to his feet in outrage. "This is an outrage. Parker, you've always had it in for successful men. These homesteaders are parasites on progress." "Sit down, Mr. Reynolds," the judge ordered sharply, "or I'll add contempt of court to your charges." As Reynolds was led away in custody, he passed close to where Rachel and Beau sat. His eyes locked with Rachel's, burning with malice. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Not by a long shot." A court deputy pushed him forward, but the threat lingered in the air. Rachel felt another pain stronger than before, radiating from her back around to her belly. She clutched Beau's arm, unable to hide her discomfort. "We need to get you to Mrs. Callahan," Beau said urgently, helping her stand. "Now." Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, supporters of both sides, curious townspeople and journalists from as far as Denver. Beau shielded Rachel as best he could, keeping her close as they made their way through the throng. They had almost reached Mrs. Callahan's house when Rachel doubled over, a cry escaping her lips as a powerful contraction seized her. "Beau," she gasped. "I think the baby's coming." His face paled, but his voice remained steady. "Let's get you inside. Mrs. Callahan will know what to do." The midwife took one look at Rachel and sprang into action. "Early, but not dangerously so," she assessed, helping Rachel to the bedroom. "First babies often take their time, so we'll likely have hours yet." Beau hovered uncertainly in the doorway. "Should I fetch the doctor, Mrs. Callahan snorted. "Dr. Williams is 3 sheets to the wind by this hour. I've delivered more babies than he's had hot dinners." Her expression softened slightly at Beau's obvious concern. "She'll be fine, Ranger. Women have been doing this since Eve." "I'd like him to stay," Rachel said between pains. "Please." The midwife raised an eyebrow but nodded. "He can wait in the parlor. I'll call if we need him." The labor progressed steadily through the evening and into the night. Mrs. Callahan proved as competent as she'd claimed, guiding Rachel through each contraction with firm encouragement and practical help. In the parlor, Beau paced restlessly, wincing at each cry from the bedroom. Captain Wallace arrived around midnight with news. "Reynolds' lawyer is already filing appeals, but the judge's ruling stands for now. We've got men watching for any of Reynolds' crew causing trouble." Beau nodded absently, his attention clearly on the sounds from the bedroom. Wallace studied him with knowing eyes. "You care for her, don't you?" "More than just professional concern." "Is it that obvious?" Beau asked, echoing Rachel's earlier question, only to someone paying attention. Wallace clapped him on the shoulder. "She seems like a good woman." "The best," Beau agreed softly. Near dawn, Rachel's cries changed in pitch and urgency. Mrs. Callahan appeared briefly in the parlor doorway. "Won't be long now," she announced. "She's asking for you, Ranger." Beau hesitated. "Is that proper?" The midwife's stern face relaxed into a rare smile. "Proper be damned. That woman's been through hell and she wants you there. So get in here." In the bedroom, Rachel lay exhausted, hair damp with sweat, face contorted with the effort of bringing her child into the world. She reached for Beau's hand as he approached, gripping it with surprising strength. "Almost there," Mrs. Callahan encouraged. "One more big push when I tell you." Rachel bore down with a primal cry that tore at Beau's heart. Then suddenly, blessedly, another cry filled the room, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. "A boy," Mrs. Callahan announced, efficiently cleaning and wrapping the infant. "Strong lungs on this one." She placed the tiny bundle in Rachel's arms. Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she gazed at her son Daniel's son with wonder and love. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "You've been quite an adventure already." Beau stood transfixed by the tableau before him, mother and child, exhausted but triumphant. When Rachel looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears and joy, something permanent shifted in his heart. "He's perfect," Beau said hoarsely. "Just like his mother." Mrs. Callahan cleared her throat. "I'll give you a moment, then this mama needs rest and lots of it." When they were alone, Rachel reached for Beau's hand again. "I want to name him Daniel for his father," she said. "But I'd like his middle name to be Beauregard, if you don't mind." Emotion constricted Beau's throat. "I'd be honored," he managed. "More than you know." "I do know," she replied softly, "because I feel the same way." Their eyes held for a long moment, full of unspoken promises. Then little Daniel Beauregard Greene made his presence known with another lusty cry, reminding them both that the future had arrived, ready or not. News of Reynolds' arrest and Rachel's baby spread quickly through Tascosa. Over the following days, as Rachel recovered from the birth, visitors arrived with gifts and well wishes. The other homesteaders who had testified, townspeople impressed by her courage, rangers paying respects to one of their own. Judge Parker himself visited before departing for Fort Smith. "The trial will be held in 3 months' time," he informed them. "I'll send word when you're needed to testify again." "We'll be ready," Rachel assured him, cradling her sleeping son. The judge regarded them thoughtfully, the young mother, the ranger who hadn't left her side, the newborn who had arrived amidst such tumultuous circumstances. "Life has a way of continuing despite our troubles," he observed, "perhaps especially because of them." As Rachel regained her strength, she and Beau began discussing their future more concretely. Captain Wallace offered Beau extended leave from ranger duties, recognizing the unusual circumstances. "Take the time you need," he told Beau. "God knows you've earned it." One evening, as they sat on Mrs. Callahan's porch watching the sunset, little Daniel sleeping peacefully in Rachel's arms, Beau broached the subject that had been on his mind. "I've been looking at land," he said. "Not far from your original homestead. Good water access, defensible position." Rachel smiled. "Still thinking about putting down roots, Ranger Daniels, more than thinking," he replied. "I've made an offer. If you're amenable, we could build something there, together." Rachel studied him in the fading light. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Beau?" He took a deep breath. "I know it hasn't been long. I know you're still healing in many ways. But yes, Rachel, I'm asking if you might consider becoming my wife. Not right away," he added hastily. "When you're ready. When it feels right." She looked down at her son, then back to Beau's earnest face. "Daniel would want me to be happy," she said softly, "to give his son a good life." "I'd try my best to provide that," Beau promised. "For both of you." Rachel reached for his hand. "I believe you would." She smiled, a true smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, Beau. When the time is right, I'll marry you." Joy transformed his face. "I'll court you proper in the meantime. Do things right." Rachel laughed, the sound like music after so much hardship. "I think we're well past proper, don't you? Met on the trail, traveled together unwed, you witnessed my child's birth." Beau grinned. "When you put it that way, we've done everything backward." "Not everything," she corrected, a blush coloring her cheeks. His expression grew tender. "No, not everything. That will come in its own time, too." 3 months later, Rachel again took the witness stand in Tascosa, this time with more confidence. Daniel Beauregard, thriving and strong, remained with Mrs. Callahan during the proceedings. Beau sat directly behind the prosecution table, his steady presence bolstering Rachel's courage. The trial lasted a week. Reynolds' expensive lawyers tried every tactic to discredit the witnesses, but Judge Parker ran a tight courtroom, allowing no intimidation or improper questioning. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, a collective sigh seemed to pass through the assembled homesteaders. Reynolds received 15 years in the federal penitentiary. As he was led away, his empire already crumbling as investors distanced themselves, he glared at Rachel and Beau with impotent rage. "He can't hurt anyone anymore," Beau said as they left the courthouse. "Not for a long time." Rachel nodded, relief washing through her. "It's really over." They collected little Daniel and returned to the land. Beau had purchased 200 acres of rolling prairie with Sweetwater Creek running through its heart. The neighboring property, Rachel's original homestead, had been awarded back to her by the court, doubling their holdings. Thomas and Martha Wilson visited often, helping with the construction of a new cabin larger and sturdier than Rachel's original home. Other homesteaders pitched in too, grateful for the stand Rachel and Beau had taken against Reynolds. They married that autumn, a simple ceremony performed by the circuit preacher with Daniel cooing in Martha's arms. Rachel wore a new dress of deep blue, Beau a clean ranger uniform he would soon put away for civilian clothes. Their wedding night was everything both had silently hoped for: tender, passionate, a culmination of feelings that had grown steadily since that first meeting on the trail. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the moonlight filtering through their new cabin's window, Rachel traced the scar on Beau's side from the bullet he'd taken for her cause. "You ever regret stopping that day?" she asked. "When you saw me on the trail?" Beau captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Not for a single moment. Best decision I ever made." Even with all the trouble that followed, the ambush, the trial, taking on a widow with another man's child, especially because of all that," he said firmly. "It showed me who you really are, Rachel, your strength, your heart." He smiled against her palm. "And Daniel is a blessing, not a burden. I'll raise him as my own, you know that." Rachel kissed him, pouring her gratitude and love into the gesture. "I know. And he'll grow up knowing about both his fathers, the one who gave him life, and the one who chose to love him." As promised, Beau left the Rangers the following spring, turning his full attention to building their ranch. Rachel's skills with crops complemented his knowledge of cattle, creating a diversified operation more resistant to the cycles of drought and plenty that characterized the Panhandle. Daniel grew into a sturdy toddler with Rachel's green eyes and his birth father's curly hair, following Beau adoringly around the ranch and calling him Papa, to Beau's undisguised delight. In their second year of marriage, Rachel discovered she was expecting again. When their daughter Elizabeth Martha Daniels arrived in the summer of 1879, her lusty cries and shock of sandy brown hair proclaimed her lineage clearly. "She looks just like you," Rachel told Beau as he cradled his daughter with awe. "Poor child," he joked, though his eyes shimmered with emotion. "Let's hope she gets your good sense and kind heart." As the children grew, so did their ranch. The difficult years of the drought gave way to seasons of plenty. They added onto the cabin, eventually building a proper two-story house with a wide porch where they could watch the sunset over land that was undeniably, securely theirs. Daniel and Elizabeth were joined by two more siblings over the years, James Thomas and Sarah Rose, completing the family Rachel and Beau had built together. Daniel never called Beau anything but Papa, though he knew and honored the story of his birth father's brave homesteading and untimely death. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Beau surprised Rachel with a special gift, a silver locket containing miniature portraits of all four children. "To remind you of what came from that terrible day," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. "How beauty can grow from ashes." Rachel leaned into his embrace, watching their children play in the yard of the home they'd built together. "I still think about it sometimes, how close I came to not making it, if you hadn't come along that day." "But I did," Beau reminded her, turning her to face him. "And you did what you needed to survive. That's who we are, Rachel, survivors who found each other when we needed it most. We'll find aid together." She quoted his words from that first meeting, smiling up at the man who had become her partner, protector, and passionate love. "Always," he promised, sealing the vow with a kiss as enduring as the land they'd fought for and won. In later years, as Tascosa grew and the frontier gradually tamed, their story became something of a local legend: the pregnant widow and the ranger who found justice and love against impossible odds. But to Rachel and Beau, it was simply their life, built day by day with work and faith and unwavering dedication to each other. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the prairie wind whispered across the land they'd made their own, they would sit together on the porch, hands clasped, and marvel at the journey that had brought them from that desperate meeting on a dusty trail to the rich, full life they now shared, a testament to courage, to second chances, and to love that arrives unexpectedly but endures through all seasons.